Welcome to Dad Hammer, Bulgers and Booze, where we discuss all things Warhammer while staying hydrated with an adult beverage. I am David the Warboss, and I'm joined by the most generic Space Marine in the Imperium, Mr. Medicae Steve. Steve, how we doing?
Doing good, man. Just another week. Gosh, school's starting. I guess summer's over. Is that what that means? I don't know.
I think so. I think what it means for me is I have to get up earlier every morning to take my kid to school versus it was kind of nice, the whole hybrid remote work that I have to do now. I know you don't have that luxury, so sorry. But
okay.
You know, for me, I work at a desk all day, so it's like I just roll out of bed. And I mean, I'm an old man, so I get up at like 6 naturally. But still, I'll just roll out of bed and drink my coffee, take my time, and then starting tomorrow, I gotta wake up, hurry up, and get my coffee, and then drive my son to school. So
yeah, packing lunches and making sure everyone gets on the bus. It's mildly depressing, but it'll be all right.
It'll be okay. I wonder one of these days, hopefully in a couple of years, where my kid will be driving and then I don't have to do that. And then I'll be longing for the days, I'm sure, to take him to school.
That's true. 5 more minutes of having a hangout time and talk to him,
yeah,
right?
I know. And, maybe talk about Warhammer. Sometimes talking about Warhammer at 6:30 in the morning with a teenager doesn't really get much of a response.
No, it's about like talking to a bear.
Yeah. Well, anyway, excited about, I guess, for our kids to get back to school, and then maybe give us some free time during the day. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But we've got a great show for you. Got a lot to talk about. The big news that we're going to cover on this show is the latest issue of White Dwarf. Issue number 490 of White Dwarf has dropped, and I got to say, it is by far the best issue that I've read. And I mean, it's outstanding. So we're going to talk through one of the big new features called Bunker, the Bunker Club, within the latest issue of White Dwarf. We're going to do a deep dive of the features and our impressions of each. So even if you're not a current subscriber, or if you are a current subscriber and you haven't looked at your latest issue yet, you've got a lot to look forward to. So we'll talk about all of that. We're also going to get into the latest news around the 40K app and how the Battleforge part of that app is going behind the paywall and what that means for Games Workshop and potentially whether or not folks are going to be able to use that in the future. And then we'll round this out with our Hobby Corner coming back and returning with some, dare I say, miracle working paint. And
miracle indeed.
We could all use some of that whenever we're painting our models. So great show. Going to get a lot of news here. Going to get right into it. First of all, thank you so much for listening to our show. If you like what you're hearing, make sure to rate, follow, and subscribe. But also just tell other people about our show. If you think it's worth their time and attention, we sure do appreciate it. But you can listen, of course, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you choose to listen to your favorite podcast. You can also find us on our website, dadhammerpodcast.com. And, of course, on all of our social media sites, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Threads now, the new thing, where we have pictures of all of our latest projects and comment on the latest activity in the Warhammer community. But first, we're going to get started with the most important part of every Dad Hammer podcast, and that is, what are we drinking? And, Steve, I'll start off with you. What do you got tonight?
Yeah, I'll take the lame-o drink tonight. No, I'm just drinking a beer tonight. It's from Fallborg Brewery. It's in New Orleans. It's called Velvet. Yeah, Voodoo Velvet. That's what it's called. It is a dark lager, which I'd never heard of, right? You think of darks, there's usually stouts, that kind of thing. So a dark lager was something kind of intriguing. We picked it up, found it on our most recent beach trip.
Sounds like an oxymoron, like a dark jumbo shrimp, dark lager.
Dark lager doesn't ring right, does it? It's sort of weird. But I thought, well, it can't be. It's got a really, really cool can. I should put the can on. It's a really neat can. It's actually kind of Warhammery and a weird. I don't know. The art style is kind of cool, right?
Yeah, on brand.
On brand, absolutely. So now we picked it up when we were down there, and I thought, well, I'll have it to give it a try because I like dark beers. It's not like a Guinness Stout. You ever had a Bass
Mm-hmm.
ale? Yeah, it's very similar to that.
Okay.
Not quite so stout dark, but not light like your typical American lagers or anything like that. So yeah, good stuff, man.
Interesting. Very different. It's interesting that you say that you look at the cans and the artwork on the can, and that helps you with your decision. It's almost like back in the 80s when you'd go into Blockbuster or something and you're looking for a game to rent or a movie to rent.
Yep.
And whatever the artwork on the front is, that's what seals the deal. If it looks cool on the front and the screens of the video game are really cool on the back, sometimes it's a mixed bag with that experience.
Sometimes it's like the old heavy metal album covers. The music could be trash, but man, the cover was cool.
Heck yeah. So very interesting choice, and I do that a lot. If it has a really cool art style or unique name, I'll go for it. So
yeah. What are you drinking, my friend?
Yeah, so I've gone a little experimental, and I'll say I've had some mixed results, but I'm definitely going to tweak the recipe some. Okay. So what I picked up at the liquor store lately is a Smores Irish cream, so a Bailey's S'mores Irish cream, and I thought, well, that's summery, right? Campfire, s'mores.
It's getting there.
So I picked that up, started mixing things, and I found out that there's actually a cocktail recipe, and I modified it a little bit. So this is a s'mores cocktail, and everybody's heard of Marsh-pero, right? Marsh-pero burns. Well, taking with the toasted marshmallow theme, I thought this would go with Marsh-pero burns. Isn't that clever? This is like a dad joke.
I just thought of a bunch of
marshmallow
thousands.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's pretty. Ooh, I'll go even one more dad joke. I'd say it's pretty campy. Right? With the marshmallow. Okay. All right. I'll stop. So this is 2 ounces of Bailey's S'mores Irish cream, 1 ounce of vodka, a little bit of chocolate syrup. I say a very little bit of chocolate syrup. You put too much in there, it turns into a milkshake. I know this from experience. But 2 ounces of Irish cream, 1 ounce vodka, a little bit of chocolate syrup, or you can put it around the inside of the glass if you want to get real fancy. You shake with ice to strain into another glass. And then, I put a little crumbled graham cracker, just a little bit. You put too much in there, it turns into like Captain Crunch, with the bottom of the bowl. So you don't want to do that. Just a tad, just to give it some flavor. And then, a dusting. Very good. And then if you want to really top it off, is that you do a skewer of toasted marshmallows. Or if you do like I did, you just take one of your little lighters on the, lighters for a fire, little triggered lighters, and toast your marshmallows up that way. So it's okay. I would say if you like Irish cream, if you just like the Bailey's flavor, you know what you're getting into. Mm-hmm. Probably a better bartender would make this taste really good. But, for me, this is a decent enough drink that I think could be made better. And I'm going to be working on it, but it feels summery. It tastes summery. Okay. So I'll call this a win. Marsh-pero burns.
Marsh-pero burns. I did make that vodka that I infused with cocoa and coffee and some other like vanilla wood. I'll have to bring it by one time. You need to try just a little bit of it. It would work perfect in this.
Okay.
Because it adds a interesting chocolate flavor to vodka. It's weird, but it's tasty.
Well, maybe I'll modify the recipe in the future, and I'll call that one Marsh-pero Returns. Right? Returns. Like the phoenix from the ashes, Marsh-pero Returns with different vodka.
Did nothing wrong.
Well, I'm gonna power through this one. It's okay, but I'm gonna keep drinking it because it's still all right. So anyway. Cheers and bottoms up, Steve.
Huzzah.
Well, let's get into some news. And boy, we've got a
Hmm.
big segment here on the latest issue of White Dwarf. And I gotta say, as someone, I'll just start off with just the cover of these White Dwarf issues. You know, we're both the subscribers. We're not
Yeah.
just going around to the local game store and picking it up. You know, all the game stores have them, and it's great to go just kind of hit the game store, pick up the latest issue, and that's awesome. But you know, for being a subscriber and paying for the yearly subscription, they do have this kind of custom nice
Yep.
cover to the magazine without all the extra squares and text and everything, and you really get this the image and the glossy logo of the White Dwarf. It is kind of nice, just an extra little bonus. The one thing I got to say though too is that I look at this and I say, okay, I didn't pay anything really extra for this other than to say I'm going to subscribe,
Yeah.
and I would consider this a limited edition, maybe even a collector's edition version of the magazine.
Fair enough.
B- And then you go look at the codex, right? That you pay
Hmm.
$30 extra for, and it's basically the exact same treatment. The only difference is that it's got a hardcover versus the magazine cover. I don't
Yeah.
know. I just don't think the codex is necessarily worth the $30 for the collector's edition, but you know, it is
And
what it is.
add a little further to that too. I mean, this is getting little bit picky, but the pages themselves are of a certain sheen or matte or whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
Like I could read it at any angle.
Yeah.
It's really annoying to read a magazine and you have to hold it at just the right angle because the because
Yeah.
it reflects light. I know that's goofy, but it really I don't know, man. It just adds to the marketing for me.
Yeah.
Good
Agreed.
job.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I feel like this magazine is made for people that actually wants to read it,
Yes.
instead of just advertise. I mean, there's
Hmm.
no there's no ads in here. I mean, other than Games Workshop being
Hmm.
a company that wants to sell you more stuff. So take that for what it's worth. But there
That's
are
right.
no ads. There's no ads for. We talked about this in previous podcasts. There's no ads for Hostess fruit pies or the latest video game or
That's
anything like
right.
that. But it's just all content. So anyway, I I want to get into the big feature for issue 490. There's tons of content here in this issue, but the main deal, the big one that's coming out is called the White Dwarf Bunker. And if you haven't heard of this, they announced it on the Warhammer community site, so you can go check that link out. But it is a essentially what they call the world's biggest and best Warhammer club. So I would maybe caveat that to say it's not necessarily the biggest or best Warhammer club per
Hmm.
se. It is the biggest and best framework to build a club.
Yes. Uh,
Man, it is packed with content, and we're going to get to each and every little bit of it. But I'm going to hit just a couple of highlights here. So first of all, when you open the package for the magazine, you are greeted with some little printouts, some extra bonus sheets, and I've got them right here with me. But
hmm.
they're like this, nice premium card stock, all color printing, and they've done this before. And typically, you just rip it out of the magazine. These come as individual sheets in the package, and man, and maybe I'm just easily pleased. Maybe I'm just kind of a sap that just say, "Ooh, toys," and I get excited no matter what.
Yeah. Right.
But I'll tell you what, I mean, the quick start guide here that
Yeah.
we've talked about so much. It's on this nice card stock. It's printed out in all color. We use
Double
this all the
sided.
time. Double sided. I mean, I don't know, Steve. I mean, what was your favorite
Well,
thing just with these extra sheets that come with
so I giggled a little bit when it just fell out. And
it?
because I truly I heard that this was gonna be included in this issue. And
Yeah.
I fully expected it to be one of the tear outs, which is generally a little less quality than this.
Yeah, a little janky.
But not much. When it fell out and it was its own thing, I was like, "Oh, now we got something."
Yeah.
And it's just I don't know. It was just a really nice. Honestly, it's nice enough. It feels like it should have been included in a box set. Frankly,
Mm,
like
you know,
this
I
should
agree
have
with that.
come in the Leviathan box
Yeah.
without a doubt. And they had the other one that had the little punch out piece that
Mm-hmm.
gave you the the 6 or so stratagems that everyone
Yeah.
gets.
Yeah.
I thought that was a nice touch. Um, about the size of an index card, that works pretty perfect.
Yeah. Just a
Oh
bunch
man,
of reference material that's on premium content. And
yeah,
yes, you can take this stuff and print it off on a really nice printer. It's nothing revolutionary.
that's
And
right.
but for someone, I think you and I are kind of cut from the same cloth, where we're both a little lazy with this stuff. And I don't. I've got a color printer. I've got a black and white printer, laser printer.
hmm
But this has got the card stock, and the printing quality is really high. And I'm already a subscriber to White Dwarf, and this just falls out like a little extra present. And I really like this. This was a nice surprise. I think what they call this is the bunker pack. So
Yeah, yeah,
you get the quick start guide. You get a little page with a bunch of punch out things. One has got a double sided, as you mentioned, a double sided little note card looking thing with all of these stratagems on it, which is
hmm
nice. You could put on the table. It's also got two of the missions, and then we'll talk about those in a second for the bunker. One for Age of Sigmar and one for 40K, which is really cool. And then it's also got these little cards that have paint recipes that you could put on one to kind of keep track of something. Yeah, it's all right. And then it's
yeah.
got the little place where you can track your achievements and progress for the hobby. So
hmm
nice little bonus. I thought this was more not. It's not required, but an icing on the cake type of thing for White Dwarf.
Yeah, I've hit this point in my life where stuff like this makes me feel a little better about buying something like this
Yeah,
subscription.
yeah, I agree. And the whole issue was just put together really well, I thought. So that was the first piece. Was the bunker pack was the,
hmm
the first thing, the course that that fell out that made Steve giggle. Um, and then the second part of the magazine is what's called challenges, and the challenges are really more about an achievement system. So even if you're not necessarily super competitive or anything like that. This gives you a way to mark off some achievements for your hobby. So if you're trying to make sure that you paint a new army, or you get a certain part of the army done, or um, you've got a different list that you want to build and things like that. These just give you challenges for painting primarily, which is really cool. Just a way to
hmm
track all of that, and gives you some points and things to track. But yeah, the next thing, and this is something, the next feature I'll really want to spend a lot of time on, and something that we've been asking for a while, and it's called in this particular issue, it's called the Combat Patrol League.
Yeah,
So they're going to have these in every single edition of White Dwarf for Bunker, where they give you this framework, this Combat Patrol League in this particular issue. It gives you scoreboards for ranking everything, for the number of games that you play, the number of games that you win, the if you have a fully painted army, if you have unique opponents that you're facing, you get points. And the whole purpose of all of this is, we're already playing games with friends. We've got a fairly
hmm
substantial size group at this point, and maybe you're going into a friendly local game store. Shout out to Blackthorn Game Center, our
yep,
local game store. But if you're going into there and you're playing potentially random players, new players, players that just started, players that have been playing for a long time, veterans of the game, this just gives you this framework, and you can literally walk into a game store and tell the store owner about it if they're not already aware, and say, hey, this is what I would like to do. Would you
yeah,
mind keeping track, or posting this little poster up in the back, so that when my friends and I come in to play, we can keep score and tally. And there's not some gigantic prize at the end of it, but it really just is a recipe to allow you to keep track and keep score of all the games that you're already playing. So,
hmm
Steve, I don't know about you, but I'm a huge numbers nerd. So, looking at this very first section where it talks about keeping score is something, and having a different place for your friends on how many things that
Hmm.
they did really blew me away. But I know it's very simple, but what were your thoughts on this Combat Patrol League?
I think that's brilliant that they started with Combat Patrol. Because they're really marketing the Combat Patrol as the beginner way of getting into 40K.
Yeah.
And the more I read about it, the more I look at it, the more I buy into that belief for sure. I like the Combat Patrol League honorable titles. I mean, how fun is that? Uh, or you get to kind of, I don't know, master artisan or campaign veteran, and it all depends on, kind of little accomplishments that you achieve or
Yeah,
whatever.
and not necessarily about winning either. Even if
No, no,
you're
no, absolutely.
even if you're not trying to win, you can the best master artisan, for example. It's almost like badges or
Hmm.
achievement trophies where you get a little something for being awesome at painting. Do you have the best painted army in your? I know I don't. So uh, someone who has the best painted army as voted by the players in the league. That's just something really cool that you have a little badging system to go along with it.
Yeah, I think it's a nice touch. And it's motivating, right? I mean, whether you do it with your friends or you, like you were saying, go to a store and you're kind of volunteering and helping to get this stuff together. I mean,
Hmm.
I think that's neat. I think people would be motivated. It sure would help a store sell combat patrol boxes too.
Yeah.
Uh, because no lie, I mean, at some point I will eventually run out of stuff to paint. It won't be this year. Uh, but stuff like this would make me, I would strongly consider looking at a combat patrol of an army that I don't want to collect, a complete army of necessarily, but
Hmm.
it'd be fun to play one. Maybe you want to try out like Gene Stealer cults just for fun. Just have a fun army, something different, and everybody, get together and you play some combat patrol for a good time. I don't know. This
Yeah.
this this gets your imagination running pretty well.
Yeah, and I like also on the scoring system, it's not just whether if you've won or how many games you played or all this other stuff. They have two extra columns at the end, which I think are great. You get points for or rather you count up over the course of the games that you're playing over three
Hmm.
months. I think that's the length of time for this particular league session, if you will. You get points for warlords slain and units slain.
Yes.
So I'm thinking as an orcs player, right? There's going to be a lot of units slain when someone's coming
True.
after me, and I've got
True story.
120 models on the board, and they're just wiping guys out left and right. So if you're a horde army, and I think what's also cool is that even if you don't feel like that you're a great player by any means, you're still learning the game, you can still come out there and rack up points and feel
Hmm.
accomplished. And there's just something to be said for bringing a big gun or a powerful unit and taking out someone's horde troops. It just feels good. It's like
Oh
eating
yeah,
popcorn.
it sure does, man. You're
Yeah.
you're correct.
So the honorable titles are really cool for the badges. The next thing that they're adding in here is the missions of the month. So this Combat Patrol League,
Hmm.
as I stated, will run for the next 3 months, and the goal would be to get your friends together, play a bunch of games, and just track how many games you've won, how many you've played, how many warlords you've slain, things like that. And over time, and you build all these points up. But the really cool thing is that included in this issue, and part of the things that fell out of the magazine, are the missions. So every single White Dwarf issue is going to come with a selected mission of the month, if you will, and that's for 40K. That's for Age of Sigmar. I think they're also going to include some the skirmish games, and we'll talk about those in a second. But the two that came this month were the Shield and Blade for 40K, which is essentially your standard fare of mission with you're defending a shield generator, and
Hmm.
there's not a ton of difference. I think that's the only thing to me a downside of 40K. A lot of times the missions are a little plain. They don't really have a lot of meat to them. It's just
They're pretty
here
generic.
here are the objectives,
Hmm.
and go get them. and they might throw in some narrative, but it's the same thing just about for every mission.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they also have, and I want to spend a little bit more time on this. I know we primarily talk about 40K, but the Age of Sigmar mission. I started reading through this,
Okay.
and I'm just thinking the whole time, this is why people love Age of Sigmar. This is why I got into Age of Sigmar with the Skaven initially,
Mm-hmm.
because the mission, this one's called the Gates of Azir, and right off the gate, right out of the gate, no pun intended, you're battling around a realm gate in the middle of the
Yeah.
board. And so you're trying to, I guess, somewhat defend it or attack it, depending. But the whole notion of the Stormcast Eternals, it's really supposed to be Stormcast Eternals versus another army. And this takes place when, the Stormcast Eternals were trying to kind of defend the Realm Gate, and this whole contrast back and forth between the two. But the really awesome part of this, in my opinion, is that they add some extra flavor to this mission, and one of those is to roll for reinforcements or a call from Azir.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the game, essentially, you get to, if you roll for this, you call for reinforcements um, after one of the phases, and you can deploy your armies within 6 inches from an objective.
Mm.
So it just adds a little narrative, a little punch to the
Mm-hmm.
mission. And I wish 40K would do this, but just the picture they have in this issue
Yeah,
of
it
the Realm
looks
Gate in the
really
middle
cool.
looks so cool. I don't know, Steve. What
Mm.
what were your thoughts on this one?
It makes me it makes me realize I really need to paint my AOS army.
Yeah, get the Slaves to Darkness done, my man.
Because we really need to do some of these games. I like it. Reminds me, that Kill Team game that you and I played. I think you were playing the Commandos,
Mm-hmm.
and we had that basically, essentially, a huge piece of terrain in the middle. Right, it was like a fort, and
Yeah.
you had woefully fewer units on the board than I did. But part of the whole scenario was you got to call in reinforcements,
Mm-hmm.
like turn 2 or turn 3 or whatever. So I think this is pretty neat because I think anytime you have to have your defenders clustered like this, you're kind of clustered around a central point that is getting attacked. I think you're already at a little bit of a disadvantage. Except it simplifies the problem because you're surrounded. So I guess it doesn't matter.
Right.
But this idea of calling in, reinforcements later, especially with, like you said, the Stormcast, that is lore specific. That
Mm-hmm.
is, and I think that's really, really neat to add a specific mission like they've done here, so that if you are a Stormcast player, you get something out of this, right? This is nice. This is fun. You could play anybody against anybody. I guess you could really tailor this to any faction, right?
Yeah, I mean
Maybe,
they're
but
trying to specifically say for it's a Blades of Corn army,
mhm,
but if you don't have it, and even then, let's just say you picked a different, it had Stormcast, which I do. I'm trying
mhm,
to finish that up, um, but let's say I had the Stormcast and you were bringing in, let's say, Slaves to Darkness, right?
mhm,
And you would be the defender in this particular mission, and one of the extra little narrative pieces they have on there is called Bloodthirsty Hordes, and so as the defender, which you would be, I'm
mhm.
trying to, as the Stormcast Eternals, I'm trying to open the Realm Gate, and you are trying to defend it. So as
Yeah.
the defender, you can set up any of your units that are not unique and which have been destroyed earlier in battle. So you essentially resurrect destroyed units. These units must be set up wholly within 6 inches of the battlefield edge and more than 9 inches away from enemy units. But you can do that at the end of my movement phase.
Oh, that's
So
great.
you're just continuing to bring
Yeah.
reinforcements over and over and over again, which I just think is so cool.
Yeah, that is neat. And it's very encouraging about what may come in the future,
Yeah.
issues as well. That's yeah, that's something to look forward to for sure.
Yeah. I mean, and they offer missions already. They in other
Mhm,
White Dwarf
mhm.
issues. So this is nothing new per se, but I mentioned this earlier on, that this is a really good framework, and
Yes.
that's what the focus of this is. So, um, not just 40K and Age of Sigmar though. They're also bringing in some skirmish content, and they
Oh
had
yeah.
mentioned that in the article. And the one for this issue is from Warcry, called the Test of Champions. And boy, I mean, I'm looking over this content. I have yet to play Warcry. It's one of those things where I'm kind of looking over your shoulder and like, oh man,
Mhm.
that stuff
Mhm.
looks really awesome.
Mhm.
So I know you're a Warcry fan. What were your thoughts of the Test of Champions mission here in this White Dwarf issue?
We've got to get this Warcry stuff on the table, man.
I know, man.
So the it's a whole different setup. You have the way you sort of play the game, right? You you have battle plan cards, you have terrain cards, and you have deployment cards, and then you have a fourth one called a twist. Um, this Test of Champions gets rid of the twist, which it's cool. It's kind of like that Tempest. Is it Tempest of Fate? Is that
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
deck that was in ninth? So it's something similar like that. If it throws a little wild card out there and changes the whole landscape or something, right? But the whole card system was meant for a very balanced and matched play. Uh, but I read through these different missions, and you roll so you could randomly get them. I would assume that you could play them however you wanted to. If you didn't want to randomly pick a battle plan, you can pick your own. One was the cursed prize, and I kind of broke it down, and for my simple mind, it's a brutal game of hot potato. Uh, so you have this a treasure token on a platform on the battlefield floor. Uh, it, it it's it deals out cursed damage, right? So as long as you're holding it, so if you have a fighter that's carrying the treasure, uh, they can allocate a number of damage points to that fighter equal to half their remaining wounds, rounding down. So you I don't really know how to describe it eloquently, but as long as you carry this thing, but you're taking damage, everyone around you is taking damage. You could curse your opponents. So you have to not only survive your opponents attacking you, you have to survive this piece of treasure.
Mm,
And the whole thing goes for
interesting.
four battle rounds. And when the battle ends, the player whose fighter is carrying the treasure wins. So um, it's got some little interesting caveats. So let's see. There is the life leech curse, which you pick a visible enemy fighter within 8 inches of this fighter. This fighter deals curse damage to that fighter. Then remove a number of damage points allocated to this fighter equal to half the number allocated to that enemy fighter by this ability, rounding down. I'd have to look, we'd have to kind of math that out in specifics. Um, it's at the beginning of each battle round, the treasure token deals curse damage to each fighter within 3 inches. So essentially, even if your allies, like your teammates, are within 3 inches of your player that's carrying the treasure, they get damage as well.
Wow.
So yeah, it's kind of fun. That looks really cool.
You know, and I was just gonna say, I think that what I've noticed about Warcry, and especially in Kill Team as well, what they've been able to do is the scenarios that they have are, they always have a lot of twists to them.
Hmm.
The brutal game of hot potato, I think, is a perfect example of that, because there are so many little nuances and options and things that change the game mid game, and it's not just. I think it would be fairly boring if all it was just Age of Sigmar models on a table
Hmm.
doing skirmish and that's it. And sometimes Kill Team was a little like that, but they
Yeah.
managed to put some scenarios in there. And I don't know what it is about the Age of Sigmar crew, whether it's Warcry or the larger game. Um, I just think they do a really good job of bringing these scenarios in, and I think that this particular mission itself. And I know there's a couple of other battle plans that go along with
Mm-hmm.
it. But this particular mission, it's just it's doing its job. And I said there were no ads in White Dwarf, but
That's right.
it's doing a job of making me think, well, why don't I play Warcry?
Mm.
And we definitely need to put this to get this on the table. And I for one am really glad that they're including the skirmish games in the White Dwarf Bunker, because there's just a lot of great content in here, but this really is
Mm-hmm.
going to appeal to everyone. So excited to see more from the skirmish and Warcry side.
Yeah, me too, man.
So we're gonna skip over to the very last couple of sections here, and there's tons of content in this White Dwarf, but one of the ones that I wanted to mention was this section called Basic Training. And Steve, you and I both have a lot of respect for Stephen Box with Vanguard
Mm-hmm.
Tactics and kind of what he's trying to do. There's a lot of good stuff in here with this, looking at the training, but the whole um, notion around this section is to give you game tactics and tips and scenarios, and for modifying your game, thinking about new rules of 10th edition and how to potentially take advantage of certain situations. And Steve, were there any particular moments within basic training that stuck out to you? There was one for me. I'll start it off. There's one for
Yeah.
me that I really liked, which was around objective holding. And everybody knows how to capture the objective in
Mm-hmm.
10th edition. You get close, there it is, objective control. But the one little tip that he put in here, which I thought was really cool, because the objectives are now physical objectives,
That's right.
you are the tip, the part of the basic training was to leverage that physical objective as almost like a post between you and your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have somebody that you don't want to get charged or into melee combat, you're physically on the other side of that
Mm-hmm.
objective and using it almost as like a screen, you know, which that's an example, I think. Just something that is not necessarily in the core rules, or maybe
Right.
even something that you'd see on a video, but just a real quick thing. And I saw, oh man, I haven't thought about that. So
Yeah, I
really
hadn't
neat.
either.
Were there any other things in this one that stuck out to you?
Well, I have a lot of Terminators, so obviously the rapid ingress stratagem and getting to use that for free. That's
Yeah, that's amazing.
yeah, because it makes me second guess about using the innate deep strike ability of the Terminators, right?
Mhm,
Like
mhm,
I could say if I got the initiative where I got to go first. Okay. Traditionally, I would have done all my movement at the end of my movement phase. I would have put my Terminator somewhere on the board of my choosing in a deep strike. And I would do it in the first round because I mean, that's just kind of what you want to do, right? Now, with this and the fact that you can use it for free, I'm very, very much more inclined to potentially hold them back,
mhm.
wait till my opponent's turn, and then put them in at the end of their movement phase. And I think this addition of being able to do stuff in your opponent's different phases is just fantastic. Um, so that one's very interesting to me. And
I
it's
mean,
going
that's
to change. It's
scary.
going to.
That's
It's
scary,
very
right?
scary. Well,
Yeah.
and you can put them in. I mean, the example that he gave was brilliant, and I hadn't really even put any stock into this. Um, Say like I hold mine back, I go first, or you go first, either one, uh, and you deep strike your Terminators into my backfield, right? Put them on a legal objective that's all the 9 inches away from any of my players.
Mhm.
Well, then instead of having to wait all the way to my next turn after you shoot the place up, uh, I can go ahead and deep strike my Terminators in and go ahead and start the event. You know, uh, make your move not worth doing, or just gives me just a little bit of extra added security, I should say,
Yeah.
so I can
Yeah.
protect my backfield better
Yeah.
if need be.
I think it adds some. some flexibility, because a lot of times you would deploy, and then I felt this way in 8th edition for sure, and somewhat in ninth. But if you didn't deploy right, if you
Right.
I was forever deploying poorly, and I'd put, oh man, I put too many units behind this building, and I left this, my warlord out in the open, or something
Yeah.
like that. I was forever deploying poorly. 10th edition has gotten a lot better with that, with declaring strategic reserves, and you can do those for free now, just up to a certain number of points. But with this deep strike stuff, and then building in some Terminators are already scary,
And they
and
got scarier this edition.
yeah,
I
they
think.
put them on the front of the box for a reason. Um, and now with this extra ability, I liked that, as part of the basic training piece here, it said that you can use it to counter deep strike. So if another unit
Yes.
is doing a deep strike, you can actually counter that with the rapid ingress stratagem. So for 0 CP on the Terminator. So
Mm-hmm.
I just think that, again, just to wrap up this segment here for the basic training, stuff like this is something we had been asking for, of
Mm-hmm.
give me somebody that plays the game all the time. And yes, of course, you can find the stuff on the internet, but I love that it's right here in print in front of me, and with the really cool artwork, and I can read through it as I want to, and then maybe even take some notes, honestly, which is really, really
Yeah.
cool.
And I like the addition, the little tidbit. It's not just necessarily Terminators. I think the Lictors
Yeah,
get it.
lictors.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming there are other armies that could possibly benefit
Yep.
from this as well. So I think that's really neat.
Yeah, really, really cool segment. And then the one last thing that I wanted to bring up as far as the bunker is something that they've had in other issues, but they've officially dubbed it Hobby Hangout
Mm-hmm.
in the bunker, where just this particular issue speaks to me because it tells you how to paint the Tyrannid Termagants step by step, which is what I'm going to be doing. I've base
Mm-hmm.
coated all of my Tyranids, and they're sitting there staring at me, so I'm going to have to paint them soon. But just giving you some tips and tricks on how to paint, and they even make some really cool bases,
Oh
which
yeah, I like the bases.
they had one that was a jungle base to make it look like bamboo
Mm-hmm.
tubes that were, they say, cut down cotton buds, which I
Yeah.
guess are like Q-tips. Is that
Q-tips.
what? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I use the right terminology. But I mean, they, of course, they paint them up really well, but still,
Oh yeah.
that's a cool little hobby hack, that they've added in this issue. So
Yeah.
anyway,
And I like the
yeah,
hobby hack itself. Chop up the sprue pieces
yeah,
and make rocks and rubble. I thought that was brilliant. I mean, I've seen that before. It's not necessarily like new, but that's the kind of stuff that's really neat, man. I like
yeah.
that.
It makes you feel like you're getting a value out
Mm-hmm.
of the issue. Um, so overall, there's tons more content that we could spend just another hour covering, but really, really impressed with this issue, with the bunker alone, and I continue to be a satisfied customer of White Dwarf. I know you are as well,
Indeed.
and highly recommend it for anyone else that wants to supplement their Warhammer hobby with some extra reading. So really cool. All right, let's move on to our next segment and spend a few minutes discussing the Warhammer 40K app. We talked about this on our recent episode of Bolters and Booze, where we thought that the improvements that they had made to the 40K app were really, really good. It's much faster, easier to search, find new rules, things like that. One of the features that was in the previous version of the app, and this one as well, is the Battle Forge, or the
Mm-hmm.
ability to create your own lists and your own armies. The difference in this version versus the last version of the app is that a lot of times, if you didn't unlock the codex for specific armies, if you didn't use that code in the back of the codex to unlock the army, you could build the list, but it wouldn't have the abilities. They would have a little padlock next to them on the
Right.
previous
Right.
version of the app. And this one, since the data sheets and the rules are free, it's all right there. However, they announced, I believe it was last Friday, that the Battle Forge feature is moving behind the paywall, I would assume, of Warhammer Plus. So
That's what I understood. Yeah.
if you don't have Warhammer Plus, you will not be able to use Battle Forge or to use it to build armies. And Steve, I'm interested in your opinion. Obviously, there is a reason for them doing this.
Yeah.
They want to entice people to buy it. But if you weren't a Warhammer Plus subscriber, is the Battle Forge feature alone enough to convince you to use it with Warhammer Plus?
No, I don't think I will. I mean, it's not a horribly expensive, subscription necessarily. I don't know. I think we talked about it before. I don't know if it's good enough to pay for
Yeah.
yet. Um, this doesn't bother me because I'm not gonna. I have no intention of dropping the subscription right
Right.
now.
Same.
So assuming that's where it's at. If if what you're asking, would I just go straight out and do the subscription to pay for this app? I don't think so. I think there's too many other ways around it.
They're going to have to do more, I think. They're going to have to
I'm
build
with
in
you.
more features into the app. They're going to have to make
Mhm.
it like something that is a true game table companion that
Yeah.
you cannot leave without it. Or even better yet, you could just take it with you to a Warhammer store if you're going to go play a
Mhm.
game, and just pull the app out, and it's got everything that you need. Even if you left all your books and you didn't print everything out, it's all right there. All right, I understand why they're moving
Yeah.
about. They have to move a feature behind the paywall to get people to use it, I guess. But I wonder if this is going to discourage others from, if you just can download the app for free and build all these lists, and then, hey, I'm gonna go to the Warhammer store, I'm gonna build a list real quick,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna pick up a combat patrol. And now that that's behind the paywall, I mean, is that just one more barrier, and you're not gonna potentially purchase another product?
Yeah, I think that it's gonna hit people in the feels, and they're just not gonna like that very much. And you will take it kind of personal, and I get it. I mean, you already pay a lot for this stuff. I mean, list building and a method of list building and some sort of outlet to do it. At the deepest part of it, for me, you shouldn't have to pay more for something that's, I don't know, essential to the game. I
Yeah.
mean, you need to be able to build a list, and oh man, because this otherwise this forces you to go look for free things or literally hope that you can type 70 plus words a minute and make a Word document for yourself. I mean,
Well,
I don't know.
there's plenty of other options out there.
There are,
That's the
but
problem.
assuming there weren't other options out there,
Hmm.
you'd have to do it the old pen and pencil way, I guess. I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know. I don't know. It's sort of a bad feeling that it's wholly behind a paywall now.
Yeah, I think what would have been, and they're doing this to get more Warhammer Plus
Hmm.
subscriptions. I mean, everything as a service is where the income is nowadays.
That's right.
So I completely understand, and I even agree with them moving the feature, the whole app even behind the Warhammer Plus paywall. That makes sense to me. I
Hmm.
understand that. The problem for them though is that they haven't really offered any additional compelling gimmicks or features of any kind on the app to
Hmm.
make me think, well, I can't live without that.
Right.
Because
Yep.
now, I mean, I can build a list anywhere. I can build it
Hmm.
online. I can build it with, I mean, Battle Scribe is back. We mentioned several other alternatives that you can build lists with. You could do it with pencil and paper, but I always compare this to the D&D Beyond website where
Yeah.
you can go and build a character for free. Where they get you is if you want to build a custom character. So if you have
Right.
for example, if you have you build a fighter, and then you want to build a swashbuckler, right?
Hmm.
That's a special class that if you want that and you want it built into the app, which does offer convenience, you need to pay for the digital version of the player's handbook. So, okay, right, that
Hmm.
makes sense, but I can still use the core experience to make my character. I just would need the digital version to have that the extra flavor to that character built into the app. And so, I think a better way to do this would be to leave. It's almost like the old version.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
should go
Yeah.
back to the old version, allow you to build all the lists that you want, and then lock some of those abilities behind Warhammer Plus.
That's right.
So, because previous ones they locked it behind the codex code, which was just a pain in the butt. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you wanted to see anything, you got to go buy the codex for whatever $50 or whatever it was. I mean, to me, they should do the same thing. So in order to make their money, they would lock all of that behind Warhammer Plus. So then as soon as you get that Warhammer Plus subscription, you get all the abilities. To me, that would
Yeah.
be a better way to do it. And that would be something that would still entice people to build a list, to go in and buy more models, and then use the Warhammer Plus subscription on top of it.
And it's weird because everything is free online. The core rules are free online.
Right.
The basic index cards, all that's free online. I know stuff is coming, and everything else it's going to be paid for. But right now, the core stuff is free, but you can use it. But I don't know, man. We're in this like, well, what does this get me? Point in our culture, and everybody is every dime you spend, you're like, what does this get me extra?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not providing that as a service provider or a company, you might be missing the boat a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, it's all about the bonus feature.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we live in an age where what's expected is the ability to use an app, build a list, all that kind of stuff. And I need to know what the hook is
That's
to
right.
entice me to buy. And I don't think that just removing the Battleforge completely and putting it behind a paywall is enough to entice people. But I'm not in charge of these things for a reason.
That's right.
So we'll
Yeah.
see how this shakes out. I know that I'm a happy Warhammer Plus subscriber,
Mm-hmm.
not just for the app, but for all the other stuff. So I'll continue to use it, and we'll see how this goes down in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's wrap with our very last segment. And we haven't really done this in a while,
Mm-hmm.
but we've been so busy with all the 40K news and 10th edition coming out that we haven't gotten back to our hobby corner. So I'm excited to get back into this because there's been a lot of hobby around, especially after
That's
all the
right.
models we have. And Steve, you've got your miracle paint that I am very interested to hear about.
I've seen this forever. It's not like this isn't new. So it's not like I found some revolutionary product, but it is AK Interactive's Streaking Grime. I finally broke down. I was like, you know what? I've seen so many people on YouTube use this, and it's just like, is it as good as they advertise? So I bought a bottle of it off of Amazon. It's not expensive. It's actually a pretty good bit. I think it's about $12, but it's around 30 ounce or 30 mLs or so. So it's, you know, a couple pots or so of GW paint. So
Hmm.
it'll go away a ways. The caveat is it is an enamel. So it's not water based. It does require mineral spirits to thin it and clean it, etc. But man, oh man, it is talent in a bottle. Especially if you're looking at the whole grimdark style of painting.
Hmm.
If you want to get in there, because the problem with acrylic washes is that no matter what, they dry fast and they stain whatever surface you're painting.
Hmm.
Um, so this streaking grime uses what you would, I guess, the smart people call a reductive technique. So you literally take this stuff and you slop it all over your model, which is frightening, by the way. Uh,
I bet.
because you're like, oh, this is not gonna look good at
Ruined it.
all.
Yeah.
No, it's done, and it looks horrible. It looks like stuck it in a bottle of motor oil and
You're
just
not
pulled it out.
you're not selling me.
Well, I
Steve.
know, man. I know, but bear with me. Trust the process.
Okay. Okay.
So then you let it dry for 10 or 15 minutes, and it dries pretty fast, but it's not like a real hard fixed dry, right? It's not completely cure. Uh, you can use Q-tips or whatever. I've have a bunch of I've bought them in the past for other reasons in hobby and stuff, but those makeup sponges and stuff, because they're
Hmm.
real disposable, they're super cheap, and they
Hmm.
don't leave lint or anything. So I started using those, and you just start kind of buffing. You need some odorless mineral spirits, and you don't need to dunk your sponge or anything like it. You just put a little bit on there, and what it does, it starts slowly pulling all that off, and you can control how much is left. Um, so you get it down, it stays in the crevices, it stays in the deep spots, and it doesn't really totally stain your paint job underneath. Um,
So what's the difference between doing this
uh huh.
and doing, say, like if you were to put the, a contrast paint or a
hmm
shade or something all over the model, and then coming back with a dry brush? Is there, what would be the benefit of using streaking grime instead?
Because you can remove this product completely without removing your base coat. So it doesn't affect your
I see.
acrylic paint underneath. Now, I will say I did, for safety's sake, I did varnish mine with like a satin varnish through my airbrush.
Hmm.
You don't have to. I have tried it on other stuff that wasn't varnished, and it works just fine. The only reason I say caveat, and the only reason I did it is because it's the physical rubbing and pressure you put on the model to remove the stuff, right? So you could take your acrylic paint off if it's thin and on, say, like a real sharp spot, um, a little easy, but it would just be because of the friction. It wouldn't be because of a chemical reaction. The
I see.
the
Okay.
mineral spirits will do nothing to the acrylic underneath. The acrylic is on there. It's cured. It's done. Um, so as opposed to a contrast paint or a shade paint that's acrylic, if you whatever you use to take it off will also take your base coat off because they're the same acrylic product.
I see.
So,
What what models have you used it on so far?
um, I used it on a set of Terminators. I did a Terminator command, a Deathwing command squad. Um, so I tried it on. I always keep a couple little test models around, little pieces that I've painted over and over and over again. So that was my big moment, and I had paint, and it was so scary, man, because I spent a lot of time painting them up. So they looked really good, but they were
And
way
then
too
just
clean. They
and
were
then
way too
doused them.
clean. Oh, that was my chest pain.
I don't I don't know if I could do that. I mean, sometimes I'm a little scared to put a matte varnish on them because
Yeah.
I just because I've gotten the model painted to where I want, and now I'm just going to spray over the whole thing. What if I
hmm
mess this up and I've literally just wasted 30 hours? I don't know how
I
long
know.
I'm going to spend. It depends on the model, of course, but I may have spent just hours painting this thing only for that to happen. So,
Now,
interesting that you would do that.
I will tell you, if you don't want to go that route, it is pretty flexible in that you could put a little in a container, take some mineral spirits and thin it out a little bit more, like you would any other paint with whatever reducer agent you have,
Hmm.
and instead take a fine brush, and all you have to do is touch it to the panel line or the crevice that's in the model, and the capillary action will just suck it right into whatever deep crevice you touch. So it's a whole different surface tension than the acrylic paint. Instead of trying to sit on top of acrylic paint, sitting on top of acrylic paint, this will just go zip and it'll flow right in, and you could just immediately take something and wipe off any boo boos you made. So if you want to just panel line, it takes a little longer. Like maybe you have something like I don't know, Lee paints towel, right? Those are
Right.
probably less grim dark kind of figures, maybe more clean aesthetic. Totally, you could individually panel line in no time, and it's super clean and super forgiving. So it is
Yeah.
a little flexible that way.
I'm wondering too if this would be usable in certain pieces of terrain too. If you
hmm
wanted to add some dark areas or even splatter type of a rust effect or
Oh yeah.
a soiled type of an area on a wall or
hmm
something like that, would be really cool to add something to that to give it some age and some wear and tear. Because you're right. I mean, a lot of times we paint these things and they look so clean, like they just stepped out of the shower.
That's right.
So adding some dirt and grime to it makes it look a little more realistic. And I've seen, I think these are the pictures that you put up on Instagram with the reel. I mean, they look really, really cool.
Thanks, man. Well, I will say you would not want to put this over a rattle can base coat, like
fair enough,
because it'll eat through that, because it's the same sort of solvent. But yeah, I appreciate the compliment. I was very happy. I was happy I didn't ruin them.
Yeah. Well, it looks really good. So streaking grime.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd definitely, if you're looking for something to grime up your models, be on the lookout for that. And don't be afraid. Just go all in on it.
Just go for it, man.
Well, thanks for the Hobby Corner tips, Steve. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for listening. That's going to wrap our show for this episode of Bolters and Booze. Hope you enjoyed the content, and I hope you enjoyed your beer with your metal art on the front of it, Steve.
Yeah.
My Marsh-pero Burns cocktail, excuse me, I got to get it right, is gone, but I'm definitely going to have to make some tweaks and modification to it. But, well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and attention, Medicae Steve. I am the Warboss, and we will see you next time on Dad Hammer. Cheers, Steve.
Cheers, Dave.